humility. It's easy to be back then. Good to see you all out today. I've got my red Chiefs tie on. Go Chiefs, beat the Eagles. Got my blue Royals shirt on. We're still in the hunt. 2.5 games out. Sporting KC, winning strong. Hey, things are good in Kansas City. This is great. Glad to see it all. I've got comments I want to make on judicial selection, and then I'm going to open up for questions and comments you might have. I'd like to start out with just noting how dangerous of a job I have being governor of the state of Kansas. I don't know how many of you know this, but this is a very dangerous job. Mostly dangerous to your health. State Fair was last week. Everything's fried there. You got to eat it. So at State Fair, I had a fried peach, green beans, potato, and a Milky Way bar. All on a stick. Well, no, wait a minute. Peach, the green beans weren't on the stick. So you got to eat everything. You guys had these. Have you had the fried Milky Way bars? Yeah. It's not bad. It's much better than the Krispy Kreme cheese that I had a couple of years ago. I was kind of real rage was that one. I told him to hold the cheese. I was really watching my cholesterol. I can't do all of this stuff here, but you got to do that. And then this week, I'm at the Home Product Show in Ulysses, and they have everything there is a home product that's grown in Grant County. It's way in southwest Kansas, and they make Milo donuts there. How many of you had a Milo donut? How many of you think it sounds really good to have a Milo donut? Well, it probably ought to be a brownie instead of a donut. It's okay, but you got to eat it, you know. And so, I mean, this is a very dangerous job to your health, and I just wanted you to know that I've got to jog more. I'm going to have to do different things to be able to stay on top of all of it. But it makes for a fun time. State Fair, everybody brings everything in, the produce in. Great year in many parts of Kansas. We finally got some rain this year. One guy had such a good gardening year that he was feeding his dog his cantaloupe that he was raising in his garden. He just kept feeding. The dog was eating his cantaloupe, and they looked at him and said, "What kind of dog eats cantaloupe?" He said, "I got a little melancholy." Thank you, Greg. I think you might be the only one that actually liked that joke. Two 15-year-old kids laughed because they thought the one was so bad. But you know, anytime you get a 15-year-old to laugh, you consider it a major success to be able to do that. A few comments about judicial selection in the state of Kansas. I've got a written set of points that what I'd like to do is to summarize those and then be willing to take as many comments or questions as long as they're easy from the audience here. We do have several legislators that could answer better probably than I could. Lance Kinzer, of course, being one of them, who's done a great job on this topic for some period of time. Charles, Charles, you still here? Yeah, he's here. Craig McPherson is here. James Todd is here. All state legislators. And Clay Barker, that runs the Republican Party in Kansas, is here. And Chad Tenpenny with Pat Roberts' office is here as well. He makes sure. Chad eats all the stuff for Pat. And at a certain point, you're kind of going, you know, I've already done it. You know, I got to watch my health a little more. And so Chad's a designated eater on their team to do that.
That was my best class in law school.
Was it? There's been an effort in the state of Kansas to do judicial selection reform for probably a decade in the state legislature. Kansas changed from an elected Supreme Court to the Missouri model system back in the 50s after the famous triple play. Some of you will know this history very well, others of you won't. But there was a Chief Justice that resigned from the Kansas Supreme Court so that the governor could be appointed by his lieutenant governor as Chief Justice of the Kansas Supreme Court, and the lieutenant governor could move up to be governor. And this is right at the end of his term, and strange as it might sound, the people of Kansas were offended by such manipulation that would be taking place. It was all legal, but that triple play sent everybody into a tizzy, and people were looking at saying we need to change this system. And then this Missouri model was adopted in the state of Kansas, moving from an elected Supreme Court in the state of Kansas back in the mid-50s, and I don't have the actual year, to this appointed system. Presently now, the Supreme Court Nominating Commission of the state of Kansas is a 9-member body. 5 of which are elected by the Bar Association of the state of Kansas, 4 by districts, and then the chairman of it is elected by the bar membership of the state of Kansas from a statewide ballot of the bar. Everybody serves for 4-year terms, and the governor appoints 4 people to the Supreme Court Nominating Commission for 4-year terms. So a new governor comes in, gets 1 appointment, and then the 8 others are appointed by somebody else until that moves on through the system. And ultimately, you can get to a point where a governor appoints 4, the Bar Association appoints 5, and you got a 9-member Supreme Court Nominating Commission. Prior to this legislative session, that selected all the Court of Appeals judges and Supreme Court judges. They did it by nominating 3 to the governor, and then the governor had to pick one of these 3 for the Court of Appeals position or Supreme Court position. If the governor decided, I don't like any of these, fine. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court then picks the judge for that slot. It isn't that it goes back for another panel. It isn't that you get another run at it. It goes to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court who then picks the Court of Appeals judge or the Supreme Court judge at that point in time. In my estimation, the people have differences of opinion. I don't think this fits a democratic model. I think you ought to have more of the elected bodies involved in this. What passed in the state of Kansas was us going to the federal model. It's an over 200-year-old model where the chief executive nominates, the state senate then confirms or denies. And then you've got 2 of your branches, other branches, the executive branch and the legislative branch, fully engaged and involved in it, not just the executive branch that gets to pick 1 out of 3 that may or may not be somebody that they're particularly interested in appointing, or you could get a nominating process that gets a particular bent to it as well by determining who's on the Supreme Court nominee. This has then full vetting by the executive branch, by the state senate, and I would submit to you the person I put forward about a month ago in the special session was the most vetted person in the history of the Court of Appeals nomination process for the state of Kansas. Prior to that, I appointed a couple people to the Court of Appeals. Most people, kind of whatever the process is, we're sure about the process. The governor picks 1 of the 3 that's nominated, and that's it. What took place this time around is we had 13 people apply for the process. We had 18 apply. 13 filled out their papers. We did a full vetting of those to my senior staff. I interviewed the final 3, nominated 1. It kept a private process on that end of it, and we were thanked by a number of people that were in that process saying, look, I'm not going to go out and put my name out if I'm not pretty confident that I'm going to be for it, because it's going to have a bad impact on my personal business practice, or it's going to have an impact here. Consequently, previously, for the most part, we were getting prior judges to apply. Nothing wrong with a judge being on the Court of Appeals, but what I want is a broader stream of people coming forward. I want the highest quality, highest capable judiciary in the state of Kansas that we can possibly get. And to do that, in many cases, you need to protect that confidentiality of the individual so that they're not putting a lot on the line just to put a name in that they're not sure if this can go forward. And if it doesn't and it gets out publicly, it hurts them personally. So we vetted those, we kept those private at that point. When I put the nominee out, the press then did their job of thoroughly investigating in their watchdog role. Caleb Stiegel, who I put forward in that position, I think is the most reviewed Court of Appeals judge in the history of the state of Kansas. Then went through a full hearing in front of the state senate, answered all questions. No Court of Appeals judge or Supreme Court judge in the state of Kansas ever gone through a hearing process in front of the state senate ever before. Went through a thorough process, thorough vetting, and then a vote took place on the Court of Appeals judge. That's now the system for the Court of Appeals nominees in the state of Kansas. The Supreme Court selection process remains the way it is. The Court of Appeals is a statutory court. The Supreme Court is a constitutional court. Take a constitutional change to change the Kansas Supreme Court. The state senate voted the 2/3 vote to change the process for selecting the state Supreme Court. The House did not. I would anticipate it probably will come back up in front of the House this year, and then that would go for a voting of the people if that passes the State House. It does not obviously have a signature requirement by the governor because it's a constitutional change, and that's 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, 50 plus 1 of a vote of the people to pass that constitutional amendment if it comes up, passes through the House for this next election cycle. I think this is important that the people have an equal standing in this election process. There's about, I'm told, I haven't looked at this, but I'm told there's about a third of appellate judges in the country picked under one of these systems, either their direct election, either the federal model, or there's some form of commission. And it's roughly the states are in a third of each of these models. We had ours dominated by one organization, the Kansas Bar Association, had a majority, and we were the only, as I recall, Lance, you may want to correct this, we were the only state in America where you had a private group, a private association, the Bar Association, that dominated, had a majority of the votes on your Supreme Court election process. Every other one had a minority position by the Bar Association. This one had a majority, and the chair was permanently the member of the Kansas Bar Association. I think that puts ours in more question, and I think it removes more of the vote of the people. Now I think we have a system that's more of a vote of the people. It's an active issue, for the Supreme Court. We've gone through our first selection process on the Court of Appeals judge. It's a issue of debate, and that people are putting forward ideas all across, and I certainly welcome that. The final thought on this, when I served the U.S. Senate 14 years, 16 in the Congress and 14 in the Senate. The judicial selection was a big deal, and you spent a lot of time on it, and it was important. And I think that federal system worked pretty well. Now, it gets hung up in the politics. There's no question that happens as well. But you do have an active participation by the executive branch and the legislative branch as represented by the Senate. You got two of your elected bodies that are engaged in it. And I think that is a good long-term system that's worked well for the country overall. Not without its difficulties of working it through the process. But ultimately it does work. And it has a good buy-in by two of the branches, the executive and the legislative branch with it. With that, Lance, I'd be happy to try to stand for questions or comments that people might have on this. We got some good time to have a dialogue and exchange, or on other topics that people want to talk about. How KU football is going to do this week. Sir.
Governor, Tim McKellar says that it was some lawyer prairie village. But with all due respect, through my Constitution again today, we've got three branches of the government, so they're separate needs. And don't you think you've accomplished, or this change has accomplished exactly the opposite of what you may have wanted to accomplish, in the sense that now it's just you or the next governor or the governor for that picking this election? There's not a public vetting of the candidates, and the way that you announced this was without talking about the names, and I heard your point. But hasn't the opposite happened, and hasn't this actually kind of an overreach by the executive branch?
Well, Tim, do you think the federal system is an overreach by the executive branch?
But you're comparing apples and oranges. There is a public system. It's not the exact same system.
Did the president publicly vet his nominees for the Court of Appeals or District Court?
All the nominees, not just the one.
He's naming who he's considering for any Court of Appeals job.
I can tell you on at least 5 or 6 recent occasions, and as you well know, all the names we considered for vetted. And under our old system, sir, I'm not going to get into the long debate. I'd love to debate you in this public forum. I'm here. But my concern is we knew who all the candidates were. And the so-called bar-heavy group rarely voted down a straight lawyer, non-lawyer line. And you did know those people were vetted. And here under this current system, and I'm not just saying And that's what
But you don't see the federal system as a closed system or as an open system?
I don't see us as having adopted the federal system. I see us as having said, you already have your picks, and I'm not going to tell you the names of the system. And that's what I think.
You're not getting my question. You don't understand my question. How or what we doing, how's what we're doing different than what the federal government does?
Well, I guess we got the federal system is bad, so let's use bring politics into the system has already played out, kind of has a problem with it. And that's just my opinion. I'd love to think we kind of talk about the whole issue, because I think we're looking at a potential overlapping into too much executive power, not just necessarily by user, but by any executive, and we're dumbing it down into the judiciary of the system. That's my concern constitutionally. Thank you.
Let me follow up on his question. I think it's a good one. And that is, we started the discussion here that society stands for the rule of law. And I think some of us are concerned that by injecting too much politics in the selection of our judiciary, we undermine the institutional integrity of that institution. And while you've made a nice case for why you wanted to not Kansas after the federal system, I think many think the federal system is not in fact serving principles behind the rule of law. So I'd love to hear a comment on why you think the institutional integrity of the court is actually furthered by this system, as opposed to trying to advocate for a system that doesn't inject as much politics into the judiciary.
I guess your thought would be we should change the federal system to be more like Kansas. The old Kansas system, Missouri, would be better. That'd get less politics. I'm asking you that, if I could.
Obviously, to change the federal system, you need a constitutional amendment. So the question really is, when should the states be a model for the federal government? The states, in fact, have been a model for the federal government over our entire constitutional history. So the question really is, what should Kansas do to be a leader in this country? And if we agree that the rule of law is so critical to the way in which a tripartite constitutional government works, then you as a leader of this state should be adopting a different system.
I guess I have a different point of view. I think having a governor fully engaged instead of picking one of three, and a state senate engaged, which isn't at all now, is better than having a governor by one association pick the nominees, in essence, pick the judge. But that's a different point of view. Yes, sir.
I'm a big fan of the changes, but I'm curious, you when you chose a particular candidate, I wondered, how did you determine what qualities or characteristics of the candidates that applied? How did you differentiate the candidates? Did you have a set system, or did you have criteria that you and your staff were going through? And did you announce sort of what your criteria were so that people have a view into your judicial picks?
We didn't announce a criteria, similar to how the federal model doesn't announce them. I don't think the president's announced, I've never seen one announce a criteria. So we didn't announce a criteria. We were looking for people that were highly competent, qualified, and able to serve on the bench. We looked at all comers, and we looked at all of them thoroughly for that, but we didn't announce a series of criteria.
But did you have a set of, if they didn't announce, did you have criteria that you're using?
No.
And I ask really because there'll be another governor, and so people will probably want to ask as part of the, as voters, how we do that for the president, for example, how do you view judicial nominees? And so I was just curious how that will be a question for the next governor, obviously, that it wouldn't have been before.
Yeah, and I think that's a good question to ask. I went through it on the federal side, and you those. I'm looking for people personally. I'm looking for people that are rule of law in orientation. That the Constitution is not considered necessarily a living document, but it's considered a Constitution. It's a written document. And that have a really good judicial temperament, have an ability to, and have proven an ability to be able to calmly consider a broad set of facts and law, that have a high degree of intellect, that have a broad base of experience. So you're looking for somebody that's done quite a few different things. And at the end of the day, you hope a good heart for public service, that they really want to do good things. And that's what I've always looked for when appointing people, whether it's on the federal side or here. That's a good question. Yeah, sure.
Governor, since the founding fathers came up with the federal system of appointment, Senate approval in 1787, there's been 212 national constitutions adopted around the world. Governor, 0 have followed the U.S. federal system of appointment of judges. Not a single other country has decided as wise. And in the states, the 50 states have had, well, Missouri's had 5 constitutions, and they've had various methods of selecting judges, etc. 32 of the judges, 32 of the states have the Missouri plan, or they say they have the Missouri plan. There's lots of variations, but the general idea is a merit kind of. And basically, the states now are divided. Although some of them have tried the federal model. Now it's divided: Missouri plan and election of judges. And the election of judges is a complete disaster, in my opinion, for the justice system. But none of the states are emulating the federal system right now. And so I have to ask you, why is it Kansas is so wise when everyone else is tending away from that, or afraid of it, has had unhappy experience with it?
The numbers you're sharing are different than the ones I understand. Now, I could be corrected, so maybe you're right and I'm wrong. As I understand, it's about third. And that we're the only state where the Bar Association has a majority of the members on the Supreme Court nominating commission. So I think that's, you ought to go back and look it up, and don't trust me because I'm pulling this up from memory. And I think, to me, that's a major issue, where you've got one association that's got a majority of the membership on your selection process. And I think this is a more democratic model that we've moved into. I understand different people have different points of view, which is pretty obvious, so I get it. Sir?
Just to clarify the facts on that, my name is Steve Ware. I'm an KU law professor who researches the 50 states judicial selection models. And there are almost half the states that have elections for their state Supreme Courts, at least if there's not a retirement mid-term, so there's an interim vacancy. But if you start with a new term, it's almost half the states elect their Supreme Courts. And then of the remaining states, there's now 13 with Kansas for Court of Appeals, but still at the state Supreme Court level 12 that use roughly a Senate confirmation system where it's either the state Senate or both houses, House and Senate, or a couple of New England states have something they call a governor's council that does the confirmation of the governor's nominee. Whereas there are about 9 states that use a Missouri plan system where the bar has power in selecting the nominating commission. And although a couple states, including Missouri, do have a majority of lawyers on the nominating commission, governor is correct that Kansas is the only state in which the bar selects a majority of the commission, because in Missouri, for example, it's a judge is the tiebreaker, if you will, the lawyer who's not selected by the bar. Thank you.
He should have been part of it.
Governor, I disagree with you on this, and Lance and Professor Ware knows this too, but I applaud the legislature and your leadership in not going to the election model, which I think would not be good for the city.
Oh, yeah.
But one comment, we really don't have the federal model because judicial independence as viewed by the founders included lifetime appointment. And we don't only have, we still have retention elections for every 3 years. So not quite the same. I don't know enough law question about the independence of the judiciary. So that, because we've all heard the debate, I think, over the selection process probably a lot of times. But there are things that are happening that I think limit the pool of people who want to be judges. Because it's funding in the judicial branch, furloughs at courthouses, the fact that if I get appointed, I might be unretained in 4 years and have to go back to being a lawyer, and I've given up my practice. How do you envision broadening the pool of those quality candidates that we all want, making it a broad and diverse pool to come and say, I want to be a judge, whether it's election in Sedgwick County or merit in Johnson County or gubernatorial selection at the Court of Appeals. How do we broaden those judges by showing that the judiciary is an important part of things? Is that?
Well, I mean, it is an important part, and I think everybody recognizes it as an important part, Greg. I don't think that's particularly the issue. The financing issues of it, I think, are a significant one. We've looked at, are there different ways that we could provide more independence to the judicial financing of it so that it could have, it's in somewhat more independence on its financing. And there have been different ideas kicked around, particularly in this last big downturn that we had. Because in most states, and we were amongst them, I was facing a $500 million budget shortfall when I stepped into office. So, I mean, we had a big hole, and the judiciary was experiencing it just like everybody else was. And looked at some different models. Now the pressure is somewhat off. Now we're at $600 million cash on hand, so we're doing well. Thankfully, and we hope to continue that. But that's one to me that I think would deserve more review and look at, because that would provide some more financial independence to the judiciary. If one looked at that, you probably need to also look at how you distribute your district judges across the state of Kansas. That's been a touchy political issue on that one, but the caseload's not evenly distributed across the state. And I think that bears looking at. It gets into the classic division of a rural and urban state. But there's a very real issue with it too on caseloads that I think would be both of those topics would be well worth digging into more. And I hope people would take time to look at those two subjects. Pressure, like I said, pressure's kind of off a little bit now, so people aren't looking at those things as much. But they really, it's like we're out of the drought now, but we're going to get another one because this is Kansas. This happens, and so now we're trying to figure out what can we do better with the overhaul, and what can we do better with our reservoirs. Well, we ought to do that with the judiciary too, and this would be a good time when we're not so much in the heat to do something like that. Anybody else? Well, thanks for giving me a workout here. I need those. I had some nice overheads to share with you. So thank you for being out. Thank you for being engaged in the process. We've had a lot of things that we needed to do as a state. We've been losing population and jobs for 30 years, and so we made some major changes on taxes. When Bob Dole was first elected in the U.S. House of Representatives, 28th most populous state in America. We're now 32nd, headed to 33rd. If we don't change the trajectory. So we really worked on that hard. On tax policy, we were out migration from this state to every surrounding state but Nebraska. They went to the Big Ten, so I don't care about Nebraska anymore. But we're changing that, and those numbers are starting to change. We're starting to see some nice job growth. We lost private sector jobs last decade in Kansas. We've gained 40,000 over the last 2.5 years. We're increasing our technical education substantially. We've got about a 50% increase in people in technical education, and that's trying to get people in a position they can get a job and work their way through college if they want to. So we've had a lot of changes we've needed to make, and it's been difficult, and it's been a contentious time period as you make changes like that. But I think a lot of people would look at the set of circumstances that I had coming into office and say, you could keep going this way, but you know the trajectory on this, because we got 30 years of data where it keeps going and it keeps laying it down. Johnson County has done well, but a lot of the rest of the state, not so much. And so we've done a lot of those things. We had a very aggressive legislature in working on those items, and I think our trajectory now is in a good direction. And not without people saying, well, I don't agree with this or I don't agree with that. I understand. But I think we're on a lot better path and footing now than we have historically been. And we're going to try to keep pressing that on forward. Thanks for your attention and for being out. God bless you all.